Well, good evening and welcome once again to John Kay's Bookshop here in Edinburgh, and happy Shakespeare Day for those who celebrate. It's the 23rd of April, it's the 460th anniversary of the birth of Shakespeare, and what better way to mark it than talking about Macbeth? Specifically, I'm going to be talking today about a famous piece of criticism written about Macbeth by L.C. Knights, an essay titled How Many Children Had Lady Macbeth? It's an essay which makes no attempt whatsoever to answer the question, but rather to ridicule those who would ask it sincerely. It's an attack on the likes of A.C. Bradley, who wrote character-based criticism that treated the characters of Shakespeare as if they had some kind of psychological truth, as if they were quote-unquote real people. Knights was frustrated by this school of criticism which saw Shakespeare's main achievement as creating great characters, and the poetry was just a luxury sprinkle on top. Some of the most egregious examples of character criticism getting out of control would be something like suggesting that Shakespeare has to kill off Mercutio in Act 3 of Romeo and Juliet because Mercutio's independence was threatening to overwhelm the play. You might have heard similar things said, whether in earnest or just almost as a casual slippage of treating characters like they are real people. You might have heard the same thing said about Falstaff, for example, killed off at the start of Henry V just to get rid of him. He was taking up too much time. He was making too many demands. The rest of the cast were feeling threatened by him. You will sometimes hear people talk that way, almost as if they are conflating the real personage of the actor and the symbol of the part. Knights gives several interesting reasons for this moving away from an Elizabethan reading of Shakespeare's plays, one of which is the rise of the novel, and another is the growing emphasis on the moral instruction or the moral function of art, both of which promote sympathetic heroes onto which a reader's identities might be projected. And I think another factor in the pervasiveness of character-based criticism is that as outsiders, we are culturally encouraged to conceive of theatre from an actor's point of view. Actors are the most famous people involved in theatre making or filmmaking. Their techniques are the most well known, and a common technique would be doing a form of this sort of character criticism, of imagining their part as a real person in order for them to play it. But what's a helpful technique for an actor isn't necessarily a way for an audience to read a play. Not to veer back into the Shakespeare authorship question, but I remember Sir Derek Jacobi, the great actor, being asked about where his doubts about Shakespeare's authorship came from. And he said words to the effect of, having played all these people across Shakespeare's canon, having been all these different people, I suddenly realized, I could no longer believe that they all sprung from one pen. Which I remember thinking when I first heard it does sound just a touch self-complimentary. It did sound a bit like he was saying, how could one mind possibly conceive of the multitudes I contain? Anyway, my point being, it might be helpful for actors to consider their roles as people. I can fully understand that. It's not necessarily illuminating for an audience to wonder what Macbeth had for breakfast, or indeed how many children his wife has had. Another thing that might be worth mentioning is that we've talked quite a bit about the ethics of representational casting on this channel, and I think one fantastic argument for representation blind casting, gender blind, whatever else blind casting, would be conceiving of plays as dramatic poems and moving away from the idea of these parts as being indissolubly linked to certain racial and gender identities. I think Macbeth is a really interesting play to think about in terms of this essay and this whole question, because it's a play or a dramatic poem that really points to its own construct. Macbeth becomes completely unstuck from language. Sign and symbol no longer add up. He is riddled by the witches and subjected to a particularly wordy doom. A sense of doom that lives on in the tradition of the Macbeth curse. It is the name of Macbeth and certain words and passages within the play that are thought to bring about bad luck. Not, the part of Macbeth or the real person playing Macbeth, but the words. It's almost as if it's an acknowledgement that the cast are working within the somewhat mystical confines of this dramatic poem and navigating it by a mixture of bargaining and crossed fingers.